Hi there, Dr. Steve Hassan, Wednesday, January 29th, 2025. with my live stream, and thanks to my team who are helping me get the message out. I feel a need to share more often and more interactively with my audience. So many people are feeling the chaos and the fear that terrorists want us to fear. And so I guess I want to just start today's live stream by saying that my work is against authoritarianism on the left and the right. So if you read my books and actually read my Substack and listen to my interviews, I talk a lot about Chinese communist brainwashing. I interviewed a former member of a Trotskyite Marxist cult. And so, yes, a lot of my focus has been on Trump and my book, The Cult of Trump, because I believe in separation of church and state and the system of government set out by the Constitution, where there's a separation of powers, and that we need a society based on trust, respect for one another, and not on hatred and fear and disgust and othering human beings and treating them like objects. For those of you who are new to my work, I'm a mental health professional, got interested in this crazy field because of my own cult recruitment in February of 1974 at Queens College. And so you're meeting me 49 years later, 4 books, 4 TEDx talks, and just been trying my best to learn more and more about how the mind works, how social psychology works. And especially now in this period, I guess I wanted to start with a line that I heard yesterday on a podcast, one of my faves, Adam Grant's Rethinking podcasts that I listen to on Apple. He interviewed Sharon McMahon on politics, and I loved that interview. I recommend it highly. At the end, she said that she repeats this to herself throughout her workday. Quote, "I refuse to allow myself to be distracted from doing the work that I need to do," unquote. And it's a message that I think really is so good for all of us to realize that our minds have limited bandwidth. And if we're filling it with emotionally laden, chaotic overload material, we're not going to get our work done and do the things that are within our power and our control to do. And so for me, I really want to help build a freedom of mind community where people understand it's your mind and only you should control it, and how to protect yourself from undue influence and unethical hypnosis, how to reality test if you're not sure if you're involved with a controlling person or group, which is, I have now a new model, a new tool at bitemodel.com. Oh, I see a question. I'm not sure how to pronounce the person's name, Krikji, perhaps she's Norwegian. How do you talk to a family member that is deep with the Trump cult? And this is the main topic of my book that I'm working on next, which emphasizes the do's and the don'ts. But it is going to require taking time and effort and energy to understand what mind control is and what it isn't. And the first thing one needs to always do is adopt a respectful, curious, active listening posture with your family member or friend who's in MAGA. And if you've already called them names or blocked them or cut them off, then you have repair that you need to do first to reach out and to say, I miss you, I'd like you back in my life. If they're totally into MAGA and Trump, I've recommended congratulate them on their victory and ask them what they're most excited about with the incoming administration. What new personnel do they feel hopeful that they're going to do something constructive? Is there anyone that they have questions about? And so what we don't want to do, what doesn't work, is attacking the leader, the doctrine, or the policy of any authoritarian group, because it makes people defensive and makes them double down. So to build rapport and trust, to adopt a posture that you're willing to change your mind, but let's be civil, let's take turns, let's listen to each other. And essentially, what I've learned works with folks in MAGA is talking about Chinese communist brainwashing, which they'll admit they do it, but they don't know what it means. So we want to unpack it for them. And I like to use Robert Lifton's 8 criteria in his 1961 book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. I've interviewed Dr. Lifton, who is alive, so you can watch my interviews with him and read the blogs on my Substack. I like that and my bite model. And then the other thing that works with folks in MAGA is talking about pimps and traffickers and how they groom people and indoctrinate them, give them a new name, new clothing, isolate them from family and friends. So we can go further into this, but ideally the key thing to start with is understand the topic. And if you're a former member, especially, you have extra superpowers, in my opinion, because you get to share your story if you understand where the parallels are. And I strongly recommend reading Combating Cult Mind Control, Freedom of Mind, and The Cult of Trump, or listen to them. So I saw a few other questions on the screen, but I was still talking about how to talk with a family member or friend in MAGA. The most important thing is to not write them off, think they're hopeless, and give up. But they need to be connected to non-believers who care about them, and start where there's common ground, whether you're sports fans or whatever works with your particular loved one. So let's have another question. I see them popping up, but then they go away. Jerry asks, how do we identify their rituals? I'm not sure what that means. Can you, whoever Jerry is, can you explain? Is there a question you want to ask? And while we're waiting, I see MZ Optics. As a mental health professional, do you think families with normalized toxic behavior can operate like a cult? Absolutely. I talk about one-on-one undue influence relationships, done a number of interviews. In fact, this week we feature coercive control. Dr. Christine Cocciola and Amy Polacco did a book called Framed on abusive relationships. But families can be authoritarian, not healthy parents that want children to grow up to become adults, to think for themselves, to question, but raising children often with corporal punishment, imposing a very strict black and white us versus them ideology, wanting them to be dependent and obedient forever. That's not a healthy parent. That's not a healthy family. And I'll also just call out the stereotypical profile of predators, cult leaders. I put in chapter 3 of The Cult of Trump a term called malignant narcissism. This is a term that was coined by Erich Fromm, trying to describe Adolf Hitler. And I compare Trump with Jim Jones, Sun Myung Moon, my former cult leader, and Hubbard of Scientology. And these criteria are on my freedomofmind.com website under Learn, Undue Influence. You can literally print out the list because you basically don't want to be in a relationship or be in a group where the leader displays these characteristics. And so I want to encourage people right now to understand that there is deliberate efforts to create chaos and fear, to drive people to tune out, give up, not be active, opposing the dictatorship, the oligarchy that's being put into place. But I believe we need to do that. Kay Clark says, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the confirmation of Pete Hegseth, how this beats down people's sense of reality, morals, and ethics and makes people feel hopeless. Yes, I am very disturbed that he was confirmed, and I read today that he rescinded General Milley's security clearance. For those who didn't know, Milley called Trump a fascist. And so this is the agenda that Trump has to put loyalists into key government positions to create an authoritarian dependence obedience pyramid and get rid of the idea that people should think for themselves, have a conscience, follow the Constitution, not violate the law by just following blindly your leader. So is it causing great problems that Hegseth was confirmed? And I believe he was confirmed by one vote, and it was a super high undue influence pressure on the politician who didn't follow his or her conscience. I think it was a woman. I'm not sure. But we're going to have Tulsi Gabbard. Oh, by the way, the Wall Street Journal did a good piece about Tulsi Gabbard's Krishna cult of Chris Butler. And next week's interview is with a former 17-year Krishna disciple. And I asked him about Tulsi Gabbard and her involvement with Butler and her commitment to this Hindu nationalistic frame that's occurring right now. And not to mention Tulsi Gabbard's Russian connections and other disturbing features. But the thing is that we really need to get organized. I'm a big believer in bottom-up organizing, not looking for some leader to tell us what to do. Yes, I have a PhD, I have a company, but I'm really looking to develop a community where I'm sharing my expertise, but I'm open to learning from other people. And so I really want people to understand being alone is not healthy in this current time period, nor is giving up or leaving the country, in my opinion. Let's see. By Kate B. said, with what we can observe right now with coercive measures towards women and LGBTQ people, do you think the USA could evolve like the fiction Handmaid's Tale? I'm afraid it could. I think the extreme religionists who want to push homophobia and have been using trans issues as a kind of Trojan horse, in my opinion, against gay rights. I'm very concerned about it. Disclosure, my son is gay. I've always been for gay and trans and indigenous rights and women's rights, especially. I'm against, dehumanizing anybody, frankly. And I'm against using fear and terror tactics to confuse and disorient people. So in my world, if you understand the techniques that are being used, you have a powerful protective ability to name it and not let it affect you as if it was real. And one thing that we now understand about Hitler's big lies that were continuously said over and over and over again is that when the brain hears a lie over and over and over again, it starts to react as if it's real or true. And so when you are hearing something that's not true, it's still very important to meta comment and say, that's a lie, period, so that it gets labeled as a lie. And we need to stay grounded. Dr. Matthews saying, are you currently accepting new volunteers? I applied on your site, but have not heard back. Yes, we are a very small operation. We're trying to encourage people to help us grow. We would love to get more paid subscribers on Substack so that we can do a lot more messaging. I'm working on a new book and a course on how to talk to MAGA. And what would help us a lot if you are volunteering is to send us your resume and tell us how you think you can help us. At the moment, the best way to help us is to amplify our messages. And if you have a large social media presence, get people to be aware of my podcast, my Substack, my online courses, and educate yourself. So stay tuned if you've already emailed and asked to volunteer. We do need a lot of help. PJ, Svenska, can a person be MAGA but without the cult mindset? How to detect and approach them? So the answer is yes. I'm looking for a graphic to hold up. There's a lot of people, most who are out here who really don't understand what's going on. Oh, thanks for putting it on the screen. There's a lot of folks who don't understand the characteristics of a destructive cult leader. They don't understand what the ideology is. They don't understand there are authoritarian cults in the cult of Trump. That's chapter 7 of my book and chapter 8 of the cult of Trump, where I name specific groups. And some of the largest networks of groups are these Christian nationalists or dominionists, or otherwise known as New Apostolic Reformation. And these are not regular Christians who believe in Jesus and follow the Bible. These are mind control cults, in my professional opinion. And the leaders claimed to be an apostle or a prophet who can speak directly to God. And God told them that Trump won the 2020 election and they're going to cover you from Satan and demons. And they claim to speak in tongues and cast out demons. So there's a lot of phobia programming. And so these people are following Trump because their prophet or apostle told them to. At the moment that the apostle or prophet tells them we're going to follow J.D. Vance, they'll follow J.D. Vance. And that's what's coming down the pike, because I don't think that Trump is going to be able to, continue throughout 4 years, given his dementia and other problems. A new M. My daughter's asking questions about the Trump administration. I'm not sure how much information I should be giving her because it's very doom and gloom. I assume she's 14 years old. How would you handle this? So I'm a big believer in developmentally appropriate parenting. And some kids at 14 are like 18-year-olds, and some kids at 14 are like 8-year-olds. So asking her to tell you more, what questions she's asking, and understanding that most young people are online and you should be knowing what sources of information they're using, and point out to them that right now the media landscape has a lot of biases on the left and the right. I've recently been referring people to a subscription that I've put for myself and for my company at Ground News. And if you want, so it has a news story, and then it has all the articles that it labels on left bias, all the articles on right bias, what percentage is in the media. And I really believe that you shouldn't just accept one particular point of view, but you should be not overloading yourself, but hearing other perspectives on things, but staying focused in your body, in the here and now, with an internal locus of control. I don't know if you've watched the Social Dilemma documentary with your 14-year-old daughter, but if you haven't, I strongly urge parents to do this with all their kids, because it explains how social media has been designed to make it addictive, and how it is being used to program people with AI algorithms and using their likes and dislikes and other data that's been scraped from the internet. And what I think is really important, and I think this is pretty verified, that young people do way better when their parents explain to them the basics of what's going on versus trying to be overprotective and shield them from hearing what's really going on. And my opinion, based on especially the last few weeks since Trump took over, is we have a threat, an existential threat to our way of life here in the United States. There are way more people who are critical of Trump than true believers, but we have to get educated, and we have to get organized. And it's really going to be, in my opinion, psychoeducation about how to tell ethical influence from unethical influence. And maybe we can put up the influence continuum graphic. Niraj, how do we help people who continue to return to the people who have just harmed them? Thinking of the two-time Trumpers who have just been taken advantage of the first time. How do we prevent relapse? So the key, I'm going to share a true story so that you have a frame to understand this. It was the context of studying ISIS, the Islamist cult, and how they were recruiting online. And I was part of a State Department counterterrorism meeting in 2015. And the fellow who had been researching them described, if you want to understand how they recruit, think of STDs, to which all of us in the room, which included Madeleine Albright and Richard Haas and Anne-Marie Slaughter, Walter Isaacson, and others, he said, the more sex you have with someone with syphilis, the more likely you are to contract it. And so if you're asking me, how do we stop people from relapsing into the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, or anything else, they need to have a community of ex-members and non-believers, and they need to understand why the group is problematic, and they shouldn't be spending all their time listening to group propaganda and information. So if you care about the person, spend time with them. Ask their opinion on a podcast or a book. Discuss watching a movie or a documentary together. And Christina, Otaru said, how do you protect your own mental health when having these kinds of hard discussions? I end up getting so worn out, and I wonder if it's worth the mental cost I have to pay. This is a really important question. Thank you for asking it. And what I want to emphasize is the old notion when you're in an airplane that if there's a sudden depressurization in the cabin, they say put the gas, the air mask on you first and then attend to the person next to you. So the idea here is you need to know yourself. You need to be sleeping properly, eating properly, exercising, being out in nature, doing things that fill you as a human being. So you need to recharge your own battery. And then when it comes to spending time interacting with people in MAGA, you need to set limits and boundaries so that it isn't, 11 o'clock at night that goes on for 3 hours. You want to be rested. You want to be refreshed. I'd probably recommend limit to an hour or less. And ideally, if it's a family member or friend, see if they're open to making a promise to you to reciprocate. So they share their point of view, you listen, you ask them questions about it, and then you share your point of view, and they listen and ask questions, and you go back and forth and back and forth. Because in my experience, I'm open to changing my mind, but give me something that is substantial, not, oh, I read it somewhere, or do the research, but there's no verifiable scientific or evidence-based link to what they're asking me to look at. But the key thing is, if something is true, it should stand up to scrutiny. And what I believe is there's a whole lot of people who voted for Trump who are very, very upset that Trump gave an unconditional pardon to the violent insurrectionists of January 6th, especially the leader of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, who are now, the new brown shirts, the new vigilantes who will do the bidding of Trump. A lot of folks who voted for Trump thought he was law and order. And by doing what he did, he's demonstrating that he's not for law and order. He's for obedience and dependency. Let's see, Rinjan 1992, just to clarify, as Trump created a cult along with all the disinformation. Sorry, it's so hard to believe this is where we are. Yes. So I wrote The Cult of Trump for Simon & Schuster. It came out in 2019. Simon & Schuster has re-released it this past September with a foreword from George Conway, the conservative attorney whose ex-wife Kellyanne Conway was in the last Trump White House. And I did an afterword. And my thesis is not only does Trump have the stereotypical profile of a cult leader, but there are actual authoritarian cults that are his puppet masters who are bringing their followers. And so if you're still in wishful thinking or denial, it's time to, stand up and look at the facts. And I think that I made a very persuasive argument in my book. I go back to Edward Bernays' 1928 book, Propaganda, all the way to where we are today. And we have a lot of work to do going forward. So just saying, I can't believe what we're at. It's like, okay, we are. So now let's and thank you for coming on this live stream. Share it with your friends. Let people know it's time for everybody to learn about brainwashing and mind control and how to protect yourself. Susie Q says, my friend went off on me on my Facebook page saying I called her this and that and the other thing when I did no such thing. She's taking any criticism of Trump, the GOP, or their policies personally. So when people accuse you of things you've never done, I think what I typically do is I just say, excuse me, but can you please show me where I said this? Did I say it in print? Did I say it online? Because that's not something I remember saying. And if they insist, then you have to ask yourself, are they gaslighting me intentionally, trying to make me think I don't remember? And then as far as taking any criticism of Trump or the GOP policies personally, what you're describing is the cult identity. And this is part of Trump's programming, is he wants people to identify with him. He is your voice. He is your protector. Trust him. So their identity is linked to him. So if you raise a question or a concern about Trump, they take it personally. I said a moment ago, what doesn't work is attacking Trump, the doctrine, or the policies directly. What does work is asking questions in a respectful, curious way, waiting for an answer, doing follow-up. I'm asked, are they going to put Trump on Mount Rushmore? Laugh out loud. My guess is if someone asked Trump, are you going to put have your face carved in the mountain? He would love to do that. That's my guess. Nancy Wallace says, Pam Hemphill, the MAGA granny who refused Trump's pardon, seems very willing to speak. Is she a resource you will reach out to? Actually, welcome to Freedom of Mind. I interviewed Pam years ago, actually, when she first got out of jail, and thanked the Capitol Police for saving her life. And she's a big fan of my book, The Cult of Trump. And I actually did reach out to her if there's a part 2 she'd like to do with me for my podcast. And I suspect she'll say yes, because she really believes that this is a mind control cult. And by the way, people wake up from mind control cults. I did. I got out of the Moonies. And I have so many people who've read my books and walked out of all types of destructive cults. So please come to freedomofmind.com, check out my Substack. I'm on social media. At the moment, my Instagram is expanding dramatically. We're closing in on 100,000 followers on Instagram, thanks to my folks doing some duo videos and carousels and messaging. JT Summer 22, are any of your materials in Spanish or any other language? I find it hard to have sympathetic conversations with my Spanish-speaking family members as the information in Spanish is limited. Actually, we have my Byte model translated into Spanish, which is on freedomofmind.com. We have the influence continuum in Spanish. We have my doctoral dissertation in Spanish. And Felicia Rosario, a former trafficking victim, soon to be a psychiatrist, is busy translating Combating into Spanish, which we hope to publish in the coming months. And hopefully Felicia will be doing some media in Spanish to start getting information out there. In the meantime, I'm hearing that there are AI apps that are very good with accurate translation into Spanish. And I'm very curious if we can take previous podcasts of mine, make them into Spanish, and create a Spanish channel and let people listen. I don't know. So if you have any ideas, if any of you tech savvy folks, let us know at Freedom of Mind. Hex, I noticed you have called benign groups cults, e.g. Swifties. What is your definition of a cult? I know you focus on destructive cults, but how do you define a general cult, destructive or otherwise? Great question. And some of my colleagues in this work only think of cults as destructive. Some of them say you need to have a charismatic figure at the top for there to be a cult. I don't agree with that. And I do think that there are groups with fanatical followers, whether they're sports fans or music fans or passionate knitters or bridge players or tennis players or whatever. But, we're human beings. We love social groups. And where it becomes a little bit culty can be where people feel like whether we're special, more special than others. So there are elements of it, but they're benign. My worry is with pyramid structured authoritarian groups that use deceptive recruitment and control people's behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions to make a new pseudo identity that's dependent and obedient on the leadership or on the ideology of the group. So the key thing with destructive cults is you're not thinking for yourself. You're not able to have permission to read critical information, talk to ex-members, learn about phobias, because that's the universal mind control technique that's used, learn about hypnosis. So the key thing is, if we are thinking for ourselves, have a conscience, can ask critical questions, have the freedom to leave, then we're talking about a healthier group. Next question. My roommate, who is also my landlord and who does not charge me rent I can afford, and who does charge me rent I can afford, without that, I would be living in my car as a full-on Trumper. How do I keep my mouth shut and not get kicked out? Be quiet. If if he's doing it to indoctrinate you into the Trump cult, then you may need to think about moving out and finding a healthier place to live. But if it's tolerable, just say, hey, listen, I know that you believe what you believe. It's not what I believe, but thank you for helping me with reducing my rent. It means a lot to me. You're a good person. So that's my practical advice. JC, woke and other formerly positive terms have been reversed and weaponized. 1984 prescient. Pro-democracy, pro-equality folks seem unable to counter, myself included. Do you have tips on messaging? Yes, I do. I do. So we have been in mimetic warfare, meme warfare, where, as I wrote about in The Cult of Trump, words have been taken, flipped, and projected onto their enemies. So a good word named, waking up, which is the first term I used when I got out of the Moonies and realized Moon was a liar and wasn't the Messiah, that's now become a loaded word of woke and has this bad association. And so I'm a big fan of choosing words, using language in a way that isn't black and white, all or nothing, good versus evil, where it's, denying the other, but having nuances, having different colors. So I have a lot of suggestions on how to talk, and I think what's going to be most useful is for me to do like role plays with folks where they pretend to be their relative being a Trumper or ex-members, and I can demonstrate how I would interact with them. But again, everyone has their own relationships and they need to be true to themselves. I see Kim is not a degraded being. Laughter. I was a child in Scientology back in the 70s and 80s. I left as a young adult. When I finally left my forever believe mother's house, I don't consciously identify with LRH, which is Hubbard, the founder. What still happens reflexively is some of the edicts, but I catch myself. I can't seem to rid myself of these reflexive thoughts. Is this typical? It's been 40 years out. Yes, it is typical. And with Scientology in particular, they have this thing called study tech, where the members are taught to look up words and indoctrinate themselves with the cult terms. So when one gets out of Scientology, one literally needs to reclaim the language and not use Scientology terms that elicit Scientology reactions and responses. And the world authority, in my opinion and disclosure, he's a personal friend and a colleague, is John Atack, Jonatack. He has a YouTube channel. He's written the definitive book on Hubbard called Let's Sell Them a Piece of Blue Sky. And he and I have talked endlessly about how people have left cults, but they've never done the healing work. They haven't taken the time to understand brainwashing and mind control and go back and rewire their own brains to be not affiliated with the cult. It takes time and effort, but as that question indicated, you can be out for 40 years and still programmed. So it's your mind. You should control it. Trust me, it's doable and it's worth doing. And if you're hanging out with other ex-Scientologists that are all using loaded terms, you'd be best to encourage them to do the same process too. Josie Lucas, how do we share the truth with MAGA if they don't trust journalism? Thus, all of our sources are fake and paid for by the left. So that's what they have been programmed to believe, that everything is fake news. However, they watch news and they will watch other news sources if they're directed to by their news sources. And so the issue is that you have to get past the frame of mind where you are trying to persuade them that they're wrong and you're right, and talk about how journalism is a mess and so many people are being paid, it's corrupt. So how can we reality test? How can we tell if something is legit or it isn't legit? And it needs to be something more than so-and-so said so. So when I was interacting with an old friend who said that global climate change was a hoax, that it wasn't real, and I said, well, let's go to nasa.gov. Let's look at the science that has been developing over 50 years. Let's look at the melting icebergs. Let's look at the heat rising. So the point is, if the person won't accept nasa.gov, what would they accept? And very interestingly, I interviewed a man who wrote a book on climate science denial called The Parrot and the Igloo. His name is David Lipsky. And I found out about him in his book because he did a chapter excerpt in Rolling Stone on how my former cult, the Moonies, through their newspaper in Washington, D.C., the Washington Times, has been the center of climate science disinformation for 50 years. And just as big tobacco knew that it caused cancer and said, no, there's no proof, fossil fuel corporations and countries have been doing a massive disinformation effort to confuse and disorient people to think that global climate change isn't real. But in the meantime, places are burning down. There are tsunamis, there are earthquakes, there are polar vortexes where they've never been before. So, at some point, there'll be a tipping point. Let's see, Shannon, can you talk about how the malignant narcissist personality will precede all of this? It doesn't lead anywhere good for anyone. Essentially, malignant narcissists are miserable human beings. They're very insecure. They never had secure attachment. So their formation of their identity has always been about getting narcissistic supply from outside of them. And with Donald Trump, he was raised in a cult of Norman Vincent Peale that said that if you believe something 100%, it will come true, and doubt is evil and satanic. So he's been programmed. People have referred to him as Teflon Don, and how can he continue with all the illegal things he's done, where he's a convicted felon and he's assaulted Eugene Carroll and dozens of other women over time. Well, he does thought stopping. But the thing is about malignant narcissists is they don't trust anyone, and everything is a transaction. I wrote in my book that he was programmed to believe you're either going to eat or be eaten by other people. So when you are in that mindset and you're meeting someone, you're thinking, what can I get out of them? Or how can I protect myself from them getting something from me? This is the opposite of what civil servants are supposed to do, who are elected to office to serve the public and not put their best interests first. In fact, not gain money, as in his crypto scam that he's supposedly made billions of dollars on. So there's going to be problems. There's going to be infighting. The Christian nationalists are going to fight the libertarians. You'll see there will be an increasing conflict, despite the needing to be loyal. You'll see there'll be a lot of conflict. How much will this president and cult affect our children? I am worried. Me too. I'm worried. And my child is 22 years old now and is almost, he said he's not really on social media at all anymore. And I think the critical thing with kids is they're going to follow their parents. And if you're able to stay hopeful, stay measured, be reassuring, provide safety, give them hugs, have fun, sing songs, go dancing, go bowling, whatever, that's going to help them a lot. And let's see, Silver Dining, Super Chat $4.99. Thank you. Have ADHD. My pattern recognition is off the charts, and so is my emotional dysregulation. Everyone in my family is MAGA. So ADHD is what's referred to as neuroatypical. And there has been medication that has been recommended for it. My son has ADHD, but he doesn't use medication. But you can learn techniques for focusing your mind. There are numerous types of ADHD. But the key thing is how to stay, in your body sane when you have family and friends who are believing delusions and etc. You need a community. You need to have other people that you can talk with and bring you back to what's real and what's reality. I do believe there's going to be millions of Americans who are Trump supporters who are going to get very disillusioned. We're already seeing it with Latinos who voted for Trump, who are now worried that their family and friends are going to get deported because they didn't believe that he would do it. As I mentioned before, people who didn't believe he would give an unconditional pardon to Stuart Rhodes and the head of the Proud Boys and other violent insurrectionists, but he did. So it's these kinds of acts, if you have a relationship with a MAGA person, if they said, oh, I voted for him, he's never going to do a pardon, and then he does, you don't want to be, I told you so, I told you so. You want to be like, I'm curious. How do you feel about this news? And be with the person. And people need to exit a cult with minimal shaming and blaming. And that's why I feel like former members telling their stories of how they realized that they were being lied to and manipulated and controlled, and their journey out is such a valuable asset for folks in the MAGA movement. See, Brittany Piper too. I'm struggling to have my family see they are part of the Trump cult, but they identify with it so closely, similarity to their Christian religion. I don't see a way out mentally for them. So there are lots of Christians who know the Bible, who follow Jesus, who are speaking out against Christian nationalism, speaking out against prosperity doctrines and New Apostolic Reformation. I have interviewed a bunch of these folks. You can check them out on my Substack as well as my podcasts. And you're going to want to figure out where your family was before they ever heard of Trump ideologically, if they were Baptist, if they were Episcopal or what, and track how they got converted. But put them back on, if they really believe in Jesus and the Bible, bring them back there and ask them to watch a speech with you by a Christian about this topic to get their opinion. And hopefully it will start seeding some points that will grow over time. Layla, Ashley, what do you say to people who bypass by saying, well, all politicians are corrupt, so Trump is no different. They're all part of the puppet show. You can agree that our current political system is corrupt. It was largely made worse by the Supreme Court that was made up of 6 right-wing judges that passed, they called something called Citizens United, which has nothing to do with citizens. It has to be Corporations United, that said that people can donate unlimited amounts of money to politicians, including foreign dictators who want to take us over, like Putin and Xi. So what I say is, you agree with where you can agree with them and say, the system is corrupt, but now what can we do today to stay grounded? And I'm a big fan of the golden rule. Don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself. Random acts of kindness. Be warm, be friendly, help others. Model your life in a way that it's going to be hard for cult members to dislike you. Famous Moose One, my brother tells me on a daily basis that I am a Marxist for not following Rump. He tells me there's proof that MAGA will save our country. I had to block his texts. So I'm not a fan of blocking, but I'm also a fan of you needing to protect yourself. So if you feel like your mental health is being compromised, do what you need to do. But what I do believe is that when people are just repeating what they've heard over and over and over, what I would say to them is, I hear you. You said this, you said this, you said this, and you've repeated it several times. I hear you. Can you give that to me, that I understand that's what you said? And they'll go, yes. Okay, then you don't need to repeat it anymore. Now, can we move on? And the idea here is we're all human. We all could be making mistakes. We all could be trusting the wrong figures and resources. But in the case of Steve Hassan, what makes Steve Hassan different? Well, Steve was in a right-wing fascist Korean cult where the leader claimed to be the Messiah, and they wanted to take over the government, the U.S. government, and make the Constitution a capital offense for people who violate the rules of the group. Most people would say the Moonies are an authoritarian cult. So that's my beginning of my credibility. And then all of my work studying Chinese communist brainwashing, hypnosis, social psychology, and read my books and see whether or not they hold water. And they have been held up by very well-respected experts in a wide variety of fields. I now have a PhD from Fielding Graduate University. I'm a Fielding Fellow. And I just want to help humanity survive. I'm for planetary survival. I see we're almost out of time. That went fast. Raven said, you're doing great service. Wish the money were more. Well, thank you for the $2. I appreciate every little bit helps. Really, this is about having the people and the resources to get the message out better and more. So I want to do a course. I want to do another book. I want to do a book on hypnosis. Super chat, $10 from Hex. Thank you, Hex. Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Your public education efforts are appreciated. Super thank you for that. And if you know any influencers, ask them to check out my work and this recording. Alaska Redhead, where do you think the disconnect happens in the brain when folks believe they are worshiping Jesus and the Bible and then have so many priorities focused on accruing wealth? Cognitive dissonance? I don't know. I think I would say it depends on the person and their background and whether they were raised Christian or not. But I do think if there's someone who's gotten a master's and a PhD in theology and is a dedicated Christian, they're going to be able to quote scripture to someone who's religious and be taken seriously in a way that me, a Jew, would never be. So I wouldn't even attempt to. Max Headroom, as we're wrapping up time, how would someone engage with the reactionary I told you so attitudes to build awareness against our peers from digging into reactionary impulses? I don't know. I think it's more important to build rapport and trust than to be right. And I say to cult members that I meet, and I meet people all the time, they're into TM, they're into Falun Gong, they're into the Forum or Tony Robbins, and I just take the attitude of, I see you're really interested in this. I have some reservations and concerns. If you're trying to bring me into the program, I have some questions I'd like answered. And then I typically will whip out my influence continuum and bite model and ask people what they think about it, and to go ask direct questions. And if something is legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny. And with that, I'm going to thank my team for helping me with this live stream. Please share the word. Let's get more people talking about the need for psychoeducation, about how the mind works and how it can be hacked and how we can deprogram or basically empower people to reality test. And thanks, Tam, for thanking me, and Rod. And we'll see you next week. I think we're going to do it Thursday of next week. And yes, Bandy Lee is awesome and brave. And I did a chapter in her latest book, The Most Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. Take care, everybody, and thank you.